This is a series of tutorials for building a simple online game using Microsoft SignalR and React, and this video is the third video of the series. In our previous two videos, we covered the creation of a user database in SQL Server and the development of a Web API to connect to this database. If you're just joining us, I highly recommend watching the first two videos of this series to get up to speed. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to create a new React app with TypeScript, focusing on implementing user login and registration interfaces. Additionally, I'll show you how to integrate this Angular UI with the ASP.NET Web API application for user authentication. Throughout the series, we'll leverage React's global context and reducer for managing state efficiently. Let's jump into coding. First, we'll create a React project with TypeScript. I've navigated to the command prompt inside the same folder where we created the Web API application. Remember, we don't need to create the UI application in this folder. We just need to specify the location for the UI application. Let's proceed with creating our React project using this command. In this series, I'm using TypeScript, so we'll select the TypeScript template when creating the React project. Then open Visual Studio Code inside the project folder. Let's start the React development server by running the command npm start. Great. It seems like the React development server is running successfully. Before beginning, we need to install some dependencies to the project. So stop the development server to proceed with the installation of dependencies. We'll install TypeScript and type definitions for Node.js, React DOM, and Jest using the following command. All commands are specified in the GitHub repository. Please refer to that for detailed instructions. TypeScript is a powerful tool that adds static typing to JavaScript, providing better tooling support and enhanced code quality. To style our application, we'll be using Bootstrap. Let me install Bootstrap for this project. Now that we have our React project set up, let's clean up some of the unnecessary files and code generated by the Create React App tool. Now, let's add some content to our React application to verify that everything is set up correctly. We'll start by adding a simple h1 tag with the text, "Hello World," to our app.tsx file. This will serve as a basic placeholder for our application's main content. Once we've added this, we'll restart the development server to see our changes reflected in the browser. Let's save our file and start the development server again to view the updated content. To keep our project organized and maintainable, let's create a folder structure. We'll start by creating several folders. First, let's create a components folder to store our reusable components. Then, we'll create a context folder to manage the global context for our application. Next, we'll create a pages folder to contain our different page components. Finally, let's create a services folder to handle communication with external services or API. By organizing our project into these folders, we can easily manage our code and separate concerns. This will make our project more modular and easier to maintain as it grows. Now, let's dive into the components folder and create specific folders for each component. Footer. This folder will contain components related to the footer section of our application. Header. Here, we'll store components for the header section, including navigation and branding. Login. This folder will hold components responsible for user authentication and login functionality. Lastly, we'll create a folder for the Tic Tac Toe game components, such as the game board and player controls. To create the header component, we'll start by navigating into the header folder. Inside this folder, let's create a new file called header.tsx. To quickly scaffold the basic structure of our component, I'll use a VS Code snippet called RAFCE, which stands for React Arrow Function Component with Export. This snippet will generate the boilerplate code for our header component. Now that we've created the header component, let's go ahead and import it into our main app.tsx file. We'll then include the header component within the app components so that it gets rendered on the screen. We can see that the header component is successfully rendered at the top of the page. Now, let's enhance the header component by adding a bootstrap navigation bar. We'll accomplish this by utilizing the navbar component from Bootstrap. And wrapping it within a container component for better styling and alignment. Inside the navbar component, we're adding a navbar.brand tag, which serves as the branding area for our application. Within this tag, we're including the name of our game, Tic Tac Toe. It seems we've encountered an issue with the Bootstrap styling not being applied to our project. This is likely because I forgot to include the Bootstrap CSS classes. Let's quickly rectify this by adding the necessary Bootstrap dependencies to our project. Great! It's good to see that the Bootstrap styling is now correctly applied to our project. We can continue developing our components. Collapse on select. This property allows the navbar to automatically close when a menu item is selected on smaller screens, providing a better user experience by conserving space. Expand equals LG specifies that the navbar should expand at the large breakpoint. BG equals dark sets the background color of the navbar to dark. Variant equals dark sets the color scheme of the navbar elements to dark. We're enhancing the navbar component by adding a navbar.toggle element. This toggle is essential for enabling mobile responsiveness and ensuring accessibility. By including the area controls attribute with the value responsive navbar nav. To complete our responsive navbar, we're integrating a collapse component along with navigation elements. Inside the collapse component, we're adding nav elements containing nav link components. These nav link components represent the different sections of our application, allowing users to easily navigate between views. In this case, we're including links for view and play, providing users with convenient access to these essential features of our Tic Tac Toe game. To include login and register links in the navbar, we'll add two additional nav link components. These components will serve as links to the login and registration pages of our application. Now let's create a footer component. For the footer, no specific functionalities are essential to this project. I've simply copied and pasted some code. You're free to customize the footer according to your preferences, or leave it as a standard footer component. Inside the Pages folder, let's create a Home folder and a Home component for the home page. Since we're using TypeScript, we need to specify the return type for this Home component as React.fc. Before creating other components, let's add routing to navigate between pages. For this, we need to install the React Router DOM dependency. Then, add the necessary components from React Router DOM. Inside the routes component, add a route with the path as / for the initial route and specify the home component as its element. Let's check this. You may encounter routing errors indicated by the browser. This is because we haven't informed the application that we're going to use routers. To resolve this, add the browser router component to the index.tsx file. Remove the React strict mode and replace it with browser router. Inside browser router, render our app component. Now it's working fine, and the home component renders at the initial path. Let's quickly add the play component inside the play folder and create the play component. And I will add this play page to our routers like this and give the path as play. Also inside the header, we have a nav link for the play page. We need to set its attribute into play to match the router path. Bootstrap nav link does not have the to property since we are using React routers. We need to import this from React router DOM. Basically, we have to add the to property to other components as well because of the nav link requires that property. Now these are not Bootstrap nav links, so we need to add some styling to nav link. Margin of 2, padding of 1, font size of 6, and text decoration set to none. Great, everything seems to be set up properly now. Let's start working on the login component by creating a new file named login.tsx inside the login folder. Inside the routers in the app component, I will add the login component with the path set to /login. You can now see that the login component route is functioning smoothly. Then let's continue with our login component. Next, let's add a nested div with the following style classes: display flex, flex direction row, justify content around, and align items center. Next, I'll include the title of the login form page, styling it with Text Center to ensure it's centered, and Text Dark for a darker text color. We'll also add a margin top of 1 for spacing. Then, let's add another div containing the text Tic Tac Toe, styled with Text Center to center it, and Text Dark for darker text color. We'll also apply a margin bottom of 1 for spacing. I'll replace the login form div with h2 tag. I'll place both the login form within the h2 tag and the Tic Tac Toe text inside a div to organize them in a row layout. Let's create another div to house the login form. Within this div, I'll include a form tag styled with the class card body. Inside the form, we'll add a div to insert the user image. For this demo, we'll simply use a random image from the following URL. I forgot to assign the card class to the main div. Let's add margin and padding adjustments. Now it looks better, with the addition of a minimum width. After the image div, let's add another div with a margin bottom of 3. Inside that div, we'll insert the username input field. Similarly, after that div, I'll add the password input field. Let's add the input field class of form control and assign the IDs of username and password to the respective input fields. And also add the placeholders accordingly. Let's add the login button, setting its type to submit, and adding the classes button and button primary. Then, we'll wrap it in a div with the class text center and margin top of 2. To create a registration form, we'll use the existing login component. We'll define the login component as a functional component that accepts props. We'll include a prop called register, which accepts a Boolean value as input. By default, this prop is set to false and is optional. If the register prop is set to true, we'll set the form name to register form and the submit button text to register. Inside the routers of the app component, I'll add endpoints for both login and register. For the register endpoint, I'll use the login component and set the register prop to true. Let's check these endpoints. You can see that they route perfectly to the register and login components. Let's start working with the inputs of the login component. I'll add the confirm password input field and password input field as separate components. For the password input field, let's define the interface of the input props. Handle password change, a function to handle password input change, with a type of any. Password value, the password value with a type of string. Password error, a string indicating any password-related error. Next, we'll accept these props in the password input field component. Inside the return statement, I'll wrap everything with an empty HTML tag, and inside that, I'll add the password input field with the value set to the password value and the onChange event set to handle password change. You can see that the onChange method accepts a React change event with HTML input element. Let's change the type of handle password change to a function that accepts a React change event with HTML input element. We'll set the name attribute to password and the placeholder attribute to password. We'll also apply the form control class for styling. Additionally, we'll add the password error display within a paragraph tag with a text decoration of danger. Let's save this and add it to the login component. We'll comment out the password input, and then add the password input component that we created. This will require setting the props for the handle password change function, password value string, and password error string. Save the file, and let's take a look at the login page. You can see that the password input field is rendered perfectly. When the register prop is true, we need to render the confirm password component. Therefore, inside the div, I'll conditionally render another password input field component if the register prop is true. If the register prop is not true, we'll return null. Save the file and let's see if this works. It seems to be working fine, but we need to change the placeholder of the confirm field. I realize that we don't need an additional confirm password field. Instead, we can simply add an additional prop to the password input field component, which is the placeholder. So I removed the confirm password input field component and added the placeholder prop to the password input field. Replace the placeholder text with the value passed via the placeholder prop. After the login component file, I'll update the placeholder text accordingly. Let's take a look at the page, and you'll see that it works fine. Next, I'll define a function to handle changes in the password input field. Let's initialize a state variable named password input using the useState hook from React. The initial value of password input is an object containing two properties, password and confirm password, both initialized with empty strings. This state variable will be used to store and manage the values of the password and confirm password input fields in the component. Also initializes a state variable named username input using the useState hook from React. The initial value of username input is set to an empty string. This state variable will be used to store and manage the value of the username input field in the component. This initializes a state variable named passwordError using the useState hook from React. It holds a string representing any error related to the password input field. This initializes a state variable named usernameError. It stores a string indicating any error related to the username input field. This line initializes a state variable named confirm password error. It holds a string representing any error related to the confirm password input field. Let's set up the username input field to have its value controlled by the username input state variable and the onChange event to trigger the handle username function with the event. Let's create this handle username function. Next, we'll add a paragraph tag to display the user input error indicator. We'll set its text color to indicate danger, and its text content to the value of username error. handle username function accepts an event parameter, which we'll set as input. This parameter has a type of React change event with HTML input element, allowing us to handle changes in the username input field. Inside the function, we retrieve the value of the username input field from the event using event.target.value.trim. We trim any leading or trailing whitespace from the username to ensure its validity. We update the username input state variable with the new value entered by the user. This ensures that the input field reflects the changes made by the user in real time. Next, we check if the length of the username is greater than 3 characters, indicating that it meets the minimum required length. If the username length is greater than 3, we clear any existing username error by setting setUseNameError to an empty string. If the username length is not greater than 3, we set the usernameError state variable to username must contain at least 4 characters, indicating to the user that their username is too short. Let's save this and check the username input field. You'll see that it works fine and displays the error message correctly. Set the initial user input error to enter username. Next, let's proceed with the handle password change function. First, we'll assign this function to the password input field handle function. This function takes an event parameter of type React change event with HTML input element. It is responsible for handling changes in the password input field. Inside the function, we can define the logic to update the state of the password input field based on the user's password input. We retrieve the value of the password input field from the event using event.target.value.trim. We trim any leading or trailing whitespace from the password to ensure its validity. The trimmed value is stored in the password input value variable. We also retrieve the placeholder of the password input field from the event using event.target.placeholder. This allows us to identify which password input field triggered the event. The placeholder value is stored in the password input field name variable. Creates a new object named new password input by spreading the properties of the password input object. It then dynamically assigns a new value to the property specified by password input field name using bracket notation. The new value is set to password input value. So do that we need exactly match the password input field name to password or confirm password. In order to match the password input field name exactly to password or confirm password, let's change the placeholders accordingly. Next we update the state variable, password input, with the new object, new password input. First, we check if the password input field name is equal to password. Next, we define regular expressions to match different password criteria. Uppercase letters, lowercase letters, digits, special characters, and minimum length. Calculate the length of the entered password. We use the regular expressions to test if the password contains at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one digit, one special character, and a minimum length of 8 characters. Then initialize an empty string variable, error message, to hold any error messages related to the password input field. If the password length is 0, we set error message to password is empty. If the password doesn't contain at least one uppercase letter, we set error message to at least one uppercase character. If the password doesn't contain at least one lowercase letter, we set the error message to at least one lowercase character. If the password doesn't contain at least one digit, we set the error message to at least one digit. If the password doesn't contain at least one special character, we set the error message to at least one special character. If the password doesn't have a minimum length of 8 characters, we set error message to at least a minimum 8 characters. If the password meets all the criteria, we set the error message to an empty string, indicating that there are no errors. Finally, we update the password error state variable with the error message stored in the error message. Next we check if the password input field name is equal to confirm password, or if the password input field name is password, and the confirm password field is not empty. Within this condition, we check if the entered password does not match the confirm password field. If the passwords match, we clear the confirm password error by setting it to an empty string. This ensures that the confirm password error reflects whether the confirm password input matches the password input field. Save all the changes and check these updates. Before that, let me set the initial error messages. We'll set the password error message to enter password, and the confirm password error message to enter password again. Additionally, I forgot to add the handle password change function to the confirm password field and set the password values to password input.password and password input.confirm password. Also, let's set the password errors to password error and confirm password error. Save all the changes, and let's check those updates. Ops. I made a mistake. Password input field placeholder seems to be a spelling mistake, which means the password input field object did not match. Let's correct the spelling mistake in the password input field placeholder to ensure it matches correctly. Save it and check the updates. You can see that all the password validations are working correctly. Additionally, the password confirmation field is functioning as expected. Let's proceed with the database user validation. To handle the form submission, we'll define a function named handleSubmit, which will take the submit event as input. And create the handleSubmit function, which will be triggered when the form is submitted. This function will receive an input event. This event is React form event associated with an HTML form element. Let's set that as the event type prevents the default behavior of the form submission using event.preventDefault. If there are any errors, we simply return from the function. If there are no errors, we can proceed with either user registration or user login depending on the value of the registration prop. If the registration prop is true, we proceed with user registration. Otherwise, we proceed with user login. To handle the fetching of registration and login, I'll create two functions, fetchLogin and fetchRegister. These functions are asynchronous, so I'll add the async keyword before each function declaration. Let's begin with login. We use a try-catch block to handle any potential errors that may occur during the fetching process. Inside the try block, we use the fetch function to make a request to the login endpoint URL. We await the response from the fetch call and store it in the result variable with a converted response to JSON format. After that, we'll alert the message from the result. We'll set the fetch request method to post and the headers to content type application/JSON. The body will be in JSON format, with the username equal to username input, and the password equal to password input.password. Then, the registration process is similar to login. I'll simply copy these steps and paste them here. Change the URL to the registration endpoint. When rendering the login component, we need to check if it's a register component or a login component. If it's not a register component, we'll set the confirm password error initial value to an empty string. However, if it is a register component, we'll set the confirm error message to enter password again. To accomplish this, I'll utilize the useEffect hook provided by React. Before making the endpoint call, we need to obtain the base URL from the ASP.NET Web API application and accept it as the React endpoint. To do that, let's navigate to the ASP.NET application. In the program.cs file, before building the app, we're adding cross-origin resource sharing CORS services to the application's service collection. Within the options, we add a new policy named Tic Tac Toe. In the policy builder, we allow any methods, any headers, and credentials to be sent with CORS requests. Additionally, we specify the allowed origins for CORS requests. In this case, requests from the React development server at localhost port number of 3000 are allowed. To apply this CORS middleware policy to the application, we use app.useCORS followed by the policy name Tic Tac Toe. The localhost port needs to be changed according to the ASP.NET Web API running host URL. ASP.NET app runs on port 5088, so we need to add that port to fetching request. After applying the middleware policy, we save the file. Let's stop the ASP.NET app and run it again. We'll then check the fetching requests to ensure everything is working correctly. You'll notice that the login is successful. Now, let's proceed to the registration process. I'll provide a new username and password. But before that, let me show you what the user database looks like. Currently, there's no user named Kassan. Let's proceed to register a new user with the username Kassan. You can see that the user registration was successful. Now, let's refresh the database. You'll notice that the new user, Kassan, has been added with an encrypted password. Finally, to set the environment variables, we'll create a .env file inside the app folder. Within this file, we'll define the following variables. Node_path. This will be set to ./src. React_app_API_URL. This will be set to the ASP.NET API host. We'll add the environment variable to the app using process.env.react_app_API_URL. Once we add the .env file, we need to restart the React development server to apply the changes. Additionally, I'll change the password input field type to password. Let's check if these changes are still applied. Great, it seems like everything is working smoothly. In this video, we've delved into the process of creating a login and register UI using React with TypeScript. We've covered the essential steps for designing a seamless user interface to facilitate user authentication. Finally, we explored the intricacies of implementing user authentication with ASP.NET Web API and SQL database integration. In the upcoming video, I'll be diving into the intricacies of JWT token creation and user validation using tokens. We'll continue our journey as we develop an online tic-tac-toe game using React, TypeScript, and SignalR. Join me as we delve into the fascinating world of real-time web applications. Please stay tuned throughout this series to learn a lot. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell.